Hi, I'm Kalis. My own brother slammed me so hard into the fridge I saw stars, then shattered my nose with his knee. I was bleeding, dizzy, reaching for the phone, until my mom ripped it from my hand. "It's just a scratch," she snapped. "Stop being dramatic." And my dad never even looked up, just muttered, "There goes the drama queen again." They thought I'd stay quiet. They had no idea what I was about to do next. Before we dive in, tell me, have you ever been dismissed or silenced by your own family? Drop a comment. What time are you listening, and where are you? Let's begin. Thanksgiving night always had a weight to it in our family, thick with memories, resentments, and the polite clinking of forks trying to hide it all. This year, the turkey was dry, the wine too sweet, and the silence unbearable. I stood in the kitchen, scraping bits of stuffing into the trash while the dishwasher hummed behind me. The fluorescent light flickered above, casting shadows over the dishes piled high like unresolved issues we never dared to name. I wasn't even trying to start anything, I swear. I just said, "So Reed, I heard Mom and Dad signed over the house to you. That true?" I didn't ask it with bitterness, maybe a little curiosity. Maybe I wanted to understand why they'd never said a word to me, their oldest daughter, the one who'd been there when Dad had his first stroke, who'd driven Mom to every chemo appointment last spring. I just wanted to know why no one told me. Reed turned from the fridge, can of beer still cold in his hand. His lips curled into that smug little smile I'd known since we were kids, the one that came right before he said something to get under my skin. "Why do you care? You never really lived here after high school. Thought you were too good for this place." I kept my voice even. "That's not true. I was just working. You know I was always around when it mattered." His eyes flashed. "Yeah, sure. Flying in from Asheville every now and then doesn't count as being around, Kalis." I turned off the faucet, wiped my hands, and looked at him. "I just think, if we're talking about family property, maybe we all should have been part of the conversation. That's all." That's when it happened. One second I was standing near the counter, the next my back slammed into the fridge door with a sickening thud, my breath caught, and before I could move, Reed's knee crashed into my face. The pain was blinding, hot, white, and then nothing but muffled ringing in my ears. I crumpled to the tile floor, my vision swimming. Somewhere in the distance I heard the football game still playing in the living room. No one had turned the volume down. I tasted blood. My mouth was open, gasping, but no sound came out at first. I felt around blindly, finally finding the edge of the countertop. I pulled myself up, slow, dizzy, one eye barely open. I stumbled toward the phone by the back wall. I don't remember deciding to call the police. My body moved on instinct, like it was trying to save itself. My fingers brushed the phone. I grabbed it, trying to press the numbers, but my hand was trembling so badly the buttons blurred together. I hit 9, then 1. That's when I felt the tug. The phone was yanked from my grip so hard it cracked against the floor. "Stop it," my mother hissed. "It's just a scratch." I looked at her through one eye, the other swelling shut. Her face was calm, like she was scolding me for spilling something on the rug. Not horror. Not concern, just irritation. "It's not a scratch," I whispered. She bent down and picked up the phone. "You always do this. Always turn things into a scene." Behind her, my father sat on the recliner, the remote still in his hand. He didn't even glance my way, just muttered, "There goes the drama queen again." I stood there, swaying. Blood dripped from my nose onto my shirt. No one moved. Not my mother, not my father, not Reed. The room was so quiet I could hear the announcer on the TV say, "Second and goal." And that's when I saw it. On the floor, near the baseboard, my leather bracelet, the one I wore every shift at the hospital. A patient had given it to me after I'd stayed through the night with her, whispering stories while she died. It had snapped during the scuffle, fallen, and now lay in a smear of blood. No one noticed. No one cared. That bracelet had meant something to me, like I meant something to people, just not here. I reached down and picked it up with shaking fingers. It was torn, useless now. Like me, maybe. I looked up again. No one had moved. I swallowed hard, then I walked to the front door, opened it, stepped out. The cold air slapped my face, and for a second, I almost went back inside, thinking maybe someone would follow. Ask me if I was okay, offer an apology, a ride to the ER. But nothing, just the door creaking shut behind me. I wiped the blood off my face with the sleeve of my jacket and stood there, under the porch light, listening to the wind. "They really don't see me at all," I whispered. And then quieter, but with a steel I hadn't heard in my own voice in years. "They don't see me, but they'll hear me. Soon." By the time I pulled into the hospital parking lot 2 mornings later, the bruising had turned a deep plum, spreading like spilled ink beneath my eye. I'd done my best with concealer in the dark bathroom of my apartment, but makeup could only do so much when your face told the truth louder than your voice ever could. I kept my head down, walking through the back entrance of the ER, badge clipped to my coat, avoiding eye contact with anyone already in the break room. I clocked in, made my way past the humming vending machines, and shut myself into the tiny staff bathroom. The mirror above the sink didn't lie. The swelling had gone down a little, but the discolored skin around my eye and cheekbones still screamed louder than any words could. My lip had healed slightly, but there was a faint split still trying to close itself. I pressed a cold paper towel to my cheek, not because it helped, but because it gave me something to do with my hands. A soft knock on the door made me flinch. "Kalis?" Zoe's voice was tentative. She was one of the new nurses, barely out of school, all bright eyes and energy. I opened the door slowly. She blinked at my face, then quickly looked down at the coffee in her hand. "Sorry, didn't mean to intrude," she said, then added quietly, "Are you safe?" I didn't respond right away. She didn't say, "What happened?" And I appreciated that. It wasn't curiosity, it was concern. "Yeah," I lied, folding my arms. "Just slipped on the back steps. Black ice." Zoe handed me the coffee. "Well, here. I figured you'd be tired. You always take the first calls, even on holidays." I forced a smile. "Thanks. That's sweet." We walked into the break room together, where a few others were lounging before shift. Jorge, one of the trauma nurses, raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He nodded at me, that silent check-in men sometimes offer when they don't know how to ask the real questions. The warmth from these people I wasn't related to, caught me off guard. The ones who'd brought me burritos on long shifts, who remembered my birthday, who knew how I took my coffee. They didn't ask too much, but they saw me, at least more than my own family did. On my first 10-minute break, I sat on the bench near the lockers and finally checked my phone. 2 days since Thanksgiving. Not a single missed call. No voicemail. No "how are you" text. I wasn't surprised. I scrolled lower. There was one message. Liana. "Don't stir up drama. You know how Reed gets. Just let it go." I stared at the screen. Just let it go. Those 5 words pressed harder into my chest than my brother's knee ever could. I didn't know what I expected from her. Maybe nothing. Maybe just not this. Not a reminder that even my own sister saw me as the problem, not the bruises. I sat back and stared at the speckled ceiling tiles. And then, like muscle memory, an old scene floated up from the depths. I was 9. Reed had been 13. We were outside at our grandparents' old place. I had taken the last Pop-Tart. He'd locked me in the shed out back, laughing while I banged on the door. It was sweltering. I screamed. I cried. No one came. When they finally found me hours later, covered in dirt and mosquito bites, our parents scolded me for playing rough. My mom had laughed. My dad said I was too sensitive. I didn't say anything that night, just like I wouldn't now. Back in the ER, I slipped into the supply closet. Not because I needed anything, but because I needed air. I sat down on an overturned crate, pulled my small notebook from my bag, and opened it to a blank page. I started to write. November 28, 2024. Right orbital bruise. 6.5 centimeters minor laceration to lower lip upper back soreness. Likely contusion from impact incident, assault by male sibling during family gathering. I paused. My hand was shaking again, but this time not from pain. From something else, something colder. Then I kept writing. History. Age 7, shoved off swing set. Age 9, locked in shed. Age 13, tripped downstairs, no apology. Age 17, called emotional and hysterical during argument over college applications. Age 25, excluded from family loan conversations. Age 28, mother told me to be quiet, reads stressed, after verbal attack. Current. Bruised face. Gaslit again, I flipped to the next page and kept writing. The list went on. For the first time I was looking at it all in one place, not as isolated events but a pattern. If I were charting this as a case at the hospital, someone would have flagged it, intervened, escalated. But because it was just family, it had never counted. The fluorescent light above me buzzed. Somewhere beyond the door, someone called out a code blue. I stood up, slid the notebook into my bag, and rejoined the world that needed me. After my shift, I sat in my car for a few minutes before driving home. The sky was the color of steel wool, threatening snow. I reached into my purse and pulled out the bracelet, still crusted with dried blood. I wrapped it gently in gauze from my nursing kit. My hands were steady now. I looked at it, small in my palm, and whispered, not to anyone but myself, "This ends with me. I won't let this pass on to the next generation." I didn't say anything when I parked in front of my parents' house. The gravel crunched under the tires like a warning, but I told myself I was just here to drop off groceries. That's what Mom had asked for. Eggs, milk, that specific oat milk creamer she likes for her tea. Nothing more, nothing less. I rang the bell out of habit, even though I still had a key. No one answered. I let myself in. The house smelled the same, lemon cleaner and some kind of potpourri that tried too hard to smell like roses, but the air felt colder, heavier. I took off my shoes at the door, like always, and stepped into the kitchen where the light filtered through lace curtains. My dad was sitting at the table, reading the paper like I didn't exist. "Hey, Dad," I said quietly. He didn't look up. From the hallway, footsteps. "Read." He walked right past me, brushing against my shoulder, and didn't say a word. Just that same sharp cologne and the sound of his boots on tile. His eyes skimmed my face. The bruises were faint now, yellowing, but not a blink, not a pause. My mother finally appeared, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "There she is," she chirped, like I'd just come in from the garden. "Put the milk in the fridge, would you?" I nodded, opening the grocery bag. She walked over, glanced briefly at my face. "You're lucky Reed still puts up with you," she said with a smile so casual I wasn't even sure she'd heard herself. I didn't reply, just set the milk down a little harder than necessary. I told her I needed to find something in the attic, some old baby blanket I thought I remembered from when I was sick once. She waved me off, already more interested in chopping carrots than asking why I needed comfort from something 2 decades old. The attic was hotter than I remembered. The pull-down ladder creaked, and I climbed slowly, careful not to bang my shoulder. I was still tender. Dust floated in the air like old memories you'd rather forget. Boxes were everywhere, holiday decorations, old yearbooks, bags of clothes that never made it to Goodwill. I spotted a faded trunk in the corner, wedged between an artificial Christmas tree and a box labeled Thanksgiving China. On its lid, in a child's handwriting, probably mine, were the words, "Family 1989-2001. I pulled it forward. The lock was already broken. Inside were albums, thick, plastic-covered, some sticky from the heat. I flipped open the top one. First pages, Mom pregnant with Reed, then Reed's first steps, his Halloween costumes, his graduation, his high school football trophies, page after page, his life laid out like a museum exhibit. Where was I? I searched for my face, my smile, any sign that I'd once lived in these walls. A couple of group shots, Thanksgiving, Christmas, but I wasn't in them. My stomach tightened. Then I found it, An album that had been half burned at the edges, the cover warped from heat or maybe dampness. I opened it carefully. Photos had been torn out, sloppily. You could still see jagged bits stuck to the corners. But one page remained, a half photo, just the edge of a birthday cake, pink frosting, and in the corner, a child's handwriting in purple marker, Kalis's Day, with a little heart. I stared at it. My breath caught. I remembered that cake. Strawberry with cream cheese frosting. I had begged for it, and then I remembered what happened that day. Reed had wanted the pink ribbon from my dress. I'd refused, hid it in the laundry basket in the hallway. He found it, ripped it from the fabric, and shoved me hard into the linen closet. Slammed the door. It locked from the outside. I was 8. I screamed at first, kicked, then cried, then whispered, then whimpered. At some point the heat made me dizzy. I remember curling up on a pile of towels, my cheek against the floor. I don't remember falling asleep, but I do remember the sound of heels. My mother. I saw her shadow through the crack under the door. She paused. And then she walked away. No one came until the next morning. I don't remember who opened the door, just the light hitting my eyes and the sticky, sour smell of sweat and fear on my dress. Back in the attic, I felt that same closeness in my throat, but this time I didn't cry. I closed the torn album slowly, carried it downstairs under my arm. I didn't say goodbye. By the time I got back to my apartment, dusk had fallen. The sky outside my window glowed with the soft pink of early evening, but inside, everything felt hollow. I laid the album on the coffee table, then went to my closet. From the top shelf, I pulled down the shoebox. Inside were scraps, photos, medical visit summaries, a bracelet stained with dried blood, a note Reed had once written and slid under my bedroom door. "You're not worth the air you breathe." I didn't throw any of it away. Tonight I started taping them to the wall, piece by piece, a bruise here, a photo there, a scribbled memory. I stepped back, arms folded. The half photo from my 8th birthday now sat at the center, pinned under a strip of masking tape. The marker squeaked softly as I finished writing the title, "The Case Against Silence." I stepped back, studied the wall for a moment. Memories, photos, scars now arranged like puzzle pieces. My hand hovered over one of the oldest photos, then dropped to my side. I wasn't ready to look at it any longer. That's when the phone rang. It was her. "Sweetheart," my mother's voice said, almost rehearsed. "How about dinner tomorrow night? Reed and Camille will be there. I thought we could move on." Move on. My fingers tightened around the phone. My face still carried the dull ache of a fading bruise. My thighs still sore from crouching in the attic. My heart blistered. Still, something in me, maybe something naive, wanted to believe. "I'll come," I said. The next afternoon I stopped by a florist and picked up a bouquet of pale yellow tulips. I don't know why. Habit, maybe. Or hope in disguise. When I arrived at their house, the porch light was already on, even though the sun hadn't set. Inside, the scent of roasted meat filled the air, mixed with something sharp. Lemon, again. My mother was in the kitchen, smoothing her blouse and adding last-minute garnishes. Her lipstick was a shade too dark, like she was playing hostess at a country club event. She turned when she saw me. "You look better," she said. "Glad the swelling's gone." Before I could respond, she turned back to the oven. I followed her to the hallway where the light was dimmer. I held the flowers in front of me like a peace offering. "Mom," my voice was steady. "I was in the attic the other day." She paused, spoon in hand. There was an old album, the one labeled 1989-2001. My pictures were gone. Her shoulders tensed. She didn't look at me. "Did Reed do that, or—" She set the spoon down. "You always made everything so heavy," she said finally, turning toward me. "Crying at birthdays, sulking at Christmas. I told your father, this one's got a flair for theatrics." I stared at her. "You tore them out?" She didn't answer, just smoothed her lipstick in the mirror beside the pantry. "You were always too dramatic, Kalis. Not everything is an attack. You ruined more holidays with your crying than I care to count." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. "I need to finish the rolls," she said, brushing past me. No apology, no flicker of guilt, just years of silence packed into one tight-lipped smile. By the time dinner started, the table was set like something out of a magazine, silverware perfectly aligned, crystal glasses. Reed's fiancée Camille was already seated with her parents, whispering something about vineyard tours in Sonoma. Reed gave me a curt nod when I walked in. My place card sat at the end, near the swinging kitchen door, farthest from the candles, the light, the conversation. I sat. Camille's father laughed loudly about something I hadn't heard. Camille leaned over. "Reed told us how you once locked yourself in a closet over a ribbon. So dramatic." Laughter. My mother chuckled. "She used to do that sort of thing all the time, so sensitive." Reed added, "One time she got a bruise from bumping into a doorknob and made Dad cancel his poker night, like it was life or death." The words slid through the room like daggers dipped in sugar. I kept my hands beneath the table, fingers curled so tight into my palms, my nails bit skin. This is the last time, I thought. This is the last time I sit here pretending this is normal. Then it happened. Reed reached across the table, loud and laughing, grabbing for the bowl of mashed potatoes. His elbow bumped the edge of the teapot, full of fresh-boiled water. I saw it happen in slow motion. It tipped. Scalding water splashed directly into my lap. The scream tore out of me before I could stop it. The pain was searing, instant. I pushed back from the table, the chair legs screeching against the floor. Everyone froze. Then my mother sighed. "That was your fault for sitting too close." No one moved. Reed gave me a half smile. "Guess you should have picked the other seat, huh?" I stumbled toward the sink, my hands shaking. I pulled open the freezer, nothing but an old bag of peas and ice trays barely frozen. I grabbed a dish towel, wet it, pressed it to my thighs. The cotton sizzled against my skin. No one followed me. I stayed there for a few minutes, breathing, biting the inside of my cheek, letting the pain crawl its way into something colder, numb. When I returned, the table conversation had resumed, as if nothing had happened, as if I hadn't screamed, as if I hadn't been burned. I stood behind my chair for a moment, then left. Back at my apartment, I changed into soft cotton pants and sat on the edge of the bed. The pain throbbed, but it wasn't just physical. It was the knowing, the confirmation. I opened my notebook and wrote 2 lists: people who were silent, people who helped hurt. I went down the names. Then I stopped. There was one I hadn't thought about in years. Not since the summer I turned 15. Someone who'd seen, once, who hadn't said much, but hadn't mocked either. I circled the name. My hand hovered over my phone, then tapped the contact. The screen rang twice before a voice answered. "Hello?" "Hi," I said softly. "I need to talk. I'm ready now." I didn't sleep. My body lay still, but my mind kept rewinding. Back to the boiling water, back to the way Reed smiled when it hit me. I could still feel the sting, not just on my skin, but deep inside my chest. I pulled the old comforter tighter around me, staring at the ceiling while the first light of morning crept through the blinds. The list I'd started the night before sat on my nightstand. People who were silent. People who helped hurt. I had scribbled names in the dark, each one reopening something I thought I'd buried. I reached over and picked it up, fingers tracing one name I hadn't seen in years. It triggered something. A smell. Bleach. Damp concrete. I was back in that locker room at 12 years old, trying to hide the bruises on my thighs by pulling my gym shorts down low. I remembered pressing a wet paper towel to the inside of my arm, wincing as it touched skin too raw. I didn't tell anyone. Back then I thought I wasn't allowed to feel pain, that it would just make me more dramatic, like Mom said. I sat up, legs aching slightly from yesterday's scald. My thighs were still red, tender to touch, but what throbbed more was this old ache I'd long ignored. I used to think I was the crazy one, for feeling left out, for crying when my picture was cut from the album, for thinking silence could be a weapon. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A calendar alert. Nothing urgent. Just a reminder to check the mailbox before noon. Old habit from years of missing deadlines when I worked freelance. I slipped into a loose pair of jeans, one of the few that didn't rub against my lap too harshly, and made my way down the stairs, list still in hand. I opened the box at the curb, mostly expecting bills. But there it was. A plain, cream-colored envelope, no return address on the front. The postmark read somewhere upstate, a town I hadn't thought about since high school. I flipped it over, frowning when I saw my name written in neat cursive. Not Kalis Bundy, just Kalis. Inside a folded letter, 2 pages, lined paper. My breath hitched at the first line. Dear Kalis, I don't know if you remember me. I was your music teacher in 8th grade, Ms. Greer. I stood frozen at the mailbox. My thumb rubbed the paper, almost afraid to go further. But then I read. I've thought about you for years. I saw the bruises. I tried to say something. I even filed a concern with the school counselor. But your parents came in. They threatened to sue. I was young and scared, and I let it go. I shouldn't have. I walked back into the house slowly, like carrying something sacred. I sat at the kitchen table, letter spread out like a lifeline. She saw. Someone had seen me back then. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't making it up. I wasn't dramatic. She continued, I still have my journal from that year. I wrote everything. I even saved the complaint form. If you ever want to talk or need someone to confirm what you lived through, I'm here. I'm so sorry I didn't fight harder back then. My hand covered my mouth. I stayed that way for a long time, just breathing. By afternoon, I picked up my phone and found the number she left. It rang twice. Hello? Hi? Ms. Greer? There was a pause. Then, Kalis? Oh my, I didn't think you'd call so soon. I could hear the emotion in her voice. That made 2 of us. I told her I got her letter, that I remembered the purple cardigan she always wore, the way she used to close her eyes when the violin students played out of tune. She chuckled, then quietly said, I'm so glad you're okay. I didn't say I wasn't okay, not yet, but I told her about the list, about the photos, about the dinner. When I got to the water, she was silent for a few seconds, then said, People like your mother. They count on silence, yours and everyone else's. We talked for almost an hour. At the end, she said she still had her journal, the complaint form, everything. If you need me to back you up, I'm ready. I should have done it sooner. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen, not just believed, but witnessed. That night, the world was quiet. The house was quiet. My thoughts weren't. I had just finished organizing a folder on my laptop labeled Documentation Phase 1 when a knock hit the door. Sharp, impatient. I opened it, expecting a delivery. Instead, there he stood, my father. No warning, no smile, just that tight jaw and pressed lips I'd seen all my childhood. I heard you've been talking, he said, stepping 1 foot inside like he owned the air in my living room. Digging up old things that should stay buried. I didn't respond. I looked at him, really looked, and saw not a father, but a man desperate to maintain control. You're making this family look bad, he hissed. You're going to destroy what little reputation we still have. If that's what you want, go ahead. But don't think there won't be consequences. He moved to leave but turned back 1 more time. You were always a burden, still are, no matter what lawyer you think will save you. Then he slammed the door. I stood there, chest heaving, not from fear, from release. It was like hearing it out loud broke something open in me that had long been suffocating. I sat back at the table, wiped my cheeks, and whispered, They never loved me. They just loved the power they had over me. I reached for my laptop. I clicked the file name, Documentation, Phase 1, and sat still, the screen's glow soft against my face. Outside, the sun had begun to lower, casting long golden lines through the blinds. I didn't move right away. My hands hovered above the keyboard, as if finishing that one action had released something inside me I wasn't ready to face. So I got up, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. My throat was dry, but I barely drank. I stared at the countertop, still lost in the echo of my father's words from the night before. "You're still our burden." He hadn't said daughter, he hadn't said family, just burden. Back in the living room, I picked up my old backup drive, the dusty silver one I hadn't touched since before smartphones ruled our lives. It sat like a forgotten relic at the edge of the bookshelf. I'd been meaning to wipe it to free up space, but now curiosity guided my hand. I plugged it in, expecting nothing. At first it was the usual clutter. Graduation photos, receipts, a few blurry selfies with college roommates I no longer spoke to. I almost shut the window down when I noticed a folder tucked between mislabeled files. The name? KBKP.2004. No memory of creating it. I clicked it open. There they were. Photos I hadn't remembered taking. Photos I must have buried, both literally and emotionally. My face, swollen. A bruise across my collarbone, yellowing into the edges of my skin. My arm, blotched in angry violet. And my eyes, dull, resigned, like I'd made peace with being hurt. Each image was dated, unedited, proof I hadn't imagined it all. I stared at the screen, frozen. My chest tightened. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even shame anymore. It was clarity. I had recorded the truth. And then, somewhere along the way, I'd convinced myself it wasn't real. That it was just me being dramatic. The words they always used. I wasn't imagining it, I whispered to the quiet room. I documented it, and I forgot. For the next hour, I copied everything into an encrypted folder. Then, almost without thinking, I opened my cloud drive, created a new directory, and titled it Project Witness. It felt like drawing a line in the sand. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted it to stop. And maybe, just maybe, I wanted to be able to say, this happened to me. And it was never okay. I was still staring at the upload bar when my phone rang. The name on the screen stopped my breath. Rachel McKinley. We hadn't spoken in years, not since we were both awkward, braces-wearing 12-year-olds playing hopscotch in the street. She was calling from Michigan now, married with kids, a life far from our little town. I answered. Hey, Rachel? Kalis, hi. Her voice was tentative, unsure if she should have called at all. This is going to sound strange, but do you have a minute? I moved to the window and leaned against the frame. Sure, what's going on? She exhaled. Do you know my niece Lily? I paused. Can't say I do. Why? She's staying with your folks right now. My sister was deployed, and your mom offered to help, said she missed having a little one around. I thought it was sweet at first. My mouth went dry. Wait, she's with them? For how long? About 3 weeks, but, Kalis, Lily said something weird this morning. She told me your brother pushed her. I stood up straighter. What? She said he told her not to be a drama queen like Kalis, said she was faking it. Kalis, she was crying. Her wrist looked swollen. I thought I should call you because I remembered some things. I sat down, hard. My legs felt like they couldn't hold the weight anymore. She's 8, Rachel continued. Just like we were. I thought maybe... I don't know. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it was a joke. But Lily doesn't lie. She's not that kind of kid. Silence stretched between us. She said my brother pushed her? Yes. And they used my name to shame her? Yes. A slow, deep heat spread through my chest, not the panicked, dizzy kind I used to get when Dad raised his voice. No, this was different. It was sharp, controlled, solid. I'm sorry if this brings up anything, Rachel added quickly, but I didn't know who else to ask. No, I said. You did the right thing. After we hung up, I sat for a long time, the photo folder still glowing behind another window on my screen. It was happening again. The same patterns, the same words, different child, same house, same hands. And just like that, the old debate returned, one I'd buried in therapy and silence. Do I speak up and risk being dragged through their threats, their denial, their ugly games again? Or do I stay quiet and let another little girl learn silence the way I did? I stared at the screen and whispered, more to myself than anyone else. Do I become the woman I wish someone had been for me? The house looked exactly the same. Maybe a little dimmer, a little more cracked around the edges, but it carried the same stale air of denial, of tightly packed lies, of too many conversations that never happened. I stood at the front door with a homemade peach pie in my hands, still warm, carefully wrapped in a clean dish towel. The same recipe Mom always loved. I had baked it with steady hands, not because I was feeling generous, but because I needed to look calm, non-threatening, like the daughter they could ignore. I rang the bell once and waited. I didn't want to walk in unannounced, not today, not when I was carrying something sharper than pie under my sleeve. My father answered. Well, look who finally stopped sulking. His voice held that familiar condescension, a smirk just beneath the words. I smiled. Not wide, but just enough. Thought I'd check in on Lily. He stepped aside and I walked in. The house smelled like rosemary and garlic. Something was in the oven. Mom was setting the table. 4 places, like nothing had shifted, like they were still the perfect family unit. She looked up and stiffened when she saw me, then her eyes landed on the pie. Peach? She asked. Fresh from my kitchen. She nodded once, as if awarding me a single point in a game I didn't ask to play. Set it by the window. Dinner's almost ready. I did as she said, slipping into the role they were comfortable with, obedient, quiet, grateful to be allowed back into their orbit. We sat around the dinner table like actors hitting our marks. Same chairs, same centerpiece, even the same flickering candle they always brought out for nice meals. Only now, my skin itched at the memory of where the bruises formed, just under the corner of that table where I'd once hit my shoulder trying to dodge a blow. Small talk filled the air. Dad asked about traffic. Mom offered me potatoes. I nodded, smiled, played the part. Then I set my fork down. I found something, I said softly, eyes on my plate. On an old drive, photos, time-stamped, clear. My father's hand froze midway to his mouth. My mother's fork clinked against her plate. I looked up at both of them. You have 72 hours, I said evenly, to tell the truth, publicly, or I will. No raised voice, no emotion they could call hysterical, just facts, cold, controlled, practiced. My father narrowed his eyes. You think threatening us will get you what you want? I don't want anything, I replied, just accountability. You think people will believe you over your own family? I leaned slightly forward. I don't need belief. I have documentation, and a timeline, and Lily. The mention of her name landed like a stone. My mother shifted. Dad's face hardened. You can bury me again, I said, or you can start digging your own graves. Your call. Silence. Then soft footsteps approached the dining room. Lily! She stood in the doorway holding a crayon and a coloring book, eyes wide. Before I could say a word, my mother snapped. What did I tell you about eavesdropping? Her voice was shrill now. You want to end up broken like her? Keep snooping around like that. Lily froze, every inch of her small frame tightening. Her bottom lip trembled, and she backed up without a word, like she'd just touched something hot. I stood slowly, napkins still in my lap. I looked straight at my mother. You just confirmed everything I needed. Her mouth opened, then shut. I didn't storm out. That's what they'd expect. I didn't make a scene or cry or yell. Instead, I walked into the kitchen. The air felt warmer there, the scent of pie hanging heavy around me. I opened the upper cabinet near the fridge and reached to the back. My old teacup was still there, white porcelain with blue vines running down the side. The one I used every night before bed when I lived here, before everything cracked. I placed it gently in my purse, zipped it closed. Back in the hallway, I glanced once toward Lily's room. The door was barely cracked open. They still think I'm bluffing, I whispered. I slipped out of the house as quietly as I had entered, the teacup nestled in my bag like a memory finally reclaimed. I didn't bother with goodbyes. Let them think I was bluffing. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the edge of my bed, laptop open, eyes locked on the audio file I had saved months ago. It was Lily's voice, small, cracked, terrified. "Mommy, please, I didn't mean to drop it. Please don't shut me out there again." And then my mother's voice. Ice, clear. "Well, maybe if you listened the first time, you wouldn't be punished. Go." I closed the file. I didn't cry. Not anymore. 2 days later, I walked into the community school board meeting. It was held in the town hall auditorium, half full, the kind of gathering where people wore stiff smiles and sipped from tiny water bottles. My parents sat at the front with folded hands and curated expressions, waiting to receive a Community Legacy Award for decades of dedicated service to youth programs. I found a seat near the back, waited. The board chair started with generic compliments, listing their donations, their leadership in parent-teacher councils, their reputation for raising strong, resilient children. When she finally paused and asked, "Would anyone like to say a few words?" I stood. "Just one thing," I said. My voice was calm, but it filled the room. "Before you hand out honors, there's something you should hear." People turned. My mother's head whipped around. My father leaned back in his seat, arms crossing slowly. I walked to the small podium, pulled out a flash drive, and plugged it into the laptop. No introduction. I just pressed play. The recording played over the speakers. Lily's voice, raw, pleading, my mother's cold dismissal. A silence followed, so heavy you could feel it pressing into your chest. Gasps. Someone near the front let out a small, broken, "Oh my God." A teacher in the third row covered her mouth. My mother turned gray. My father sat rigid, jaw clenched. "I'm Kaylis," I said when the audio ended. Their daughter, Lily's sister, the one who was also told to go outside when she cried. I waited years, too many years. Then came a voice from the side. "I reported a bruise on Lily's arm last spring," said Mrs. Ackerman, Lily's music teacher, standing slowly. Nobody followed up. I asked the principal. I never got a response. And then another. "We were their neighbors," said a man behind me. "Every Saturday we heard screaming. We thought someone else would say something." The room was no longer polite. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, "I'm done waiting." My mother looked like she might faint. My father's mouth twitched, something between rage and panic. Then he stood abruptly, pulled a folded paper from his blazer, and stepped up toward the front of the room. "She's unstable," he said, his voice shaking in that tightly controlled way he used when trying to sound rational. "She was hospitalized for mental illness 3 years ago. Here's the documentation. You should know what kind of person's making these accusations." He held the paper up like a shield. I didn't move. I didn't need to. From the back row, a voice cut through the air. "That's not accurate." Everyone turned. "I'm Dr. Sharon Levin," she said, rising with a quiet authority. "I'm the physician listed on that file, and that document has been altered, severely. Kaylis was seen for physical injury, not psychological. She was never admitted for mental health evaluation. This file is a forgery." For a moment, no one breathed. My father's hand dropped slowly to his side. His face lost its mask. His bluff had been called in public. I took one step toward the podium again. "You forged my records," I said, "just like you erased every mark you left, just like you convinced everyone I was the difficult one." I reached into my bag and pulled out the teacup, walked to the front and placed it gently on the wooden podium. "I used to drink chamomile from this while pressing ice to my face," I said. "You told me it was my fault the cup cracked, that I dropped it. But I kept it, because I knew one day I'd pour the truth back into it." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Security had arrived by then, murmurs turning into action. "We're going to need you both to come with us," one officer said, approaching my parents. They didn't resist. They didn't speak, just stood, stunned, as the room parted and watched them walk down the aisle, not as heroes but as people whose shadows had finally caught up with them. And as they reached the back, I caught a flicker of movement by the hallway. Lily. She stood near the doorframe, clutching her backpack, eyes wide but dry. She didn't blink. She didn't cry. She just watched, just like I once did. Lily didn't move. She just stood there, barely taller than the door handle, her eyes locked on mine. For a moment, neither of us said anything. There wasn't anything to say. She'd heard it all, and I knew that look. I'd worn it once too. That night, I didn't sleep. Again. Instead, I made tea. No chamomile, just plain black, hot and strong. I sat at my little kitchen table while the city softened into silence, and I stared out the window like the answers might be stitched into the night sky. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. Still. Like my hands had stopped shaking after years of pretending they weren't. A week later, I was in my attorney's office, seated across from Jeanette, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with a steel gray bob and a filing system that could probably take down a cartel. She slid a folder toward me. Child Protective Services filed formal charges against your parents this morning. Child endangerment, falsifying medical records, interference with mandated reporting. I nodded slowly. And Lily? She's been placed in temporary foster care for now, Jeanette said gently. But we've started your guardianship petition. Given the public nature of your testimony and the documentation you've provided, I don't foresee pushback. I exhaled through my nose and looked down at my hands. Can you add a clause? Jeanette tilted her head. Go on. I want it on record. They're not to contact me, or Lily. Ever. No letters, no surprise just want to talk calls. Nothing. She nodded, already scribbling. I'll make sure it's airtight. As I left her office, the sun was hanging low, warm and amber, painting shadows across the sidewalk. I passed by the corner cafe where my mother once told me, "No one's going to believe your little stories, Kalis. You always make things sound worse than they are." Funny. The world finally listened the moment I stopped trying to make it sound better. That afternoon, I found myself facing a reporter outside Lily's school. I hadn't agreed to any formal interviews, but she was young and earnest, holding her mic like it was a moral compass. "Ms. Brooks," she asked softly, "why didn't you speak up sooner?" I looked into the camera lens, then past it, toward the empty swing set behind her. "Because no one ever asked how I was doing," I said. "They just called me dramatic." She lowered the mic slowly, eyes wet. "Thank you," she whispered. It wasn't about fame. I didn't want a feature in the Sunday paper. But sometimes, you say something because another little girl might be listening, and maybe she'll believe her own voice when no one else does. 2 days later, I drove to the group shelter where Lily had been placed temporarily. The building wasn't much, peeling paint, cracked sidewalk, but it was clean, and the staff were kind. Lily was sitting on a mat near the corner of the playroom, cradling a worn-out stuffed dog that looked like it had survived 5 generations. She looked up when I walked in, eyes unsure. I crouched down, hands on my knees. "Hey, sweet pea." She blinked once. "Do I have to go back?" I felt something twist in my chest. I leaned in closer. "No, baby," I whispered. "Not ever." She didn't cry. She just leaned forward, pressed her forehead gently to mine, and held it there. I let her stay that way as long as she needed. When she finally sat back, I reached into my bag. "I brought something for you." She watched carefully as I pulled out a small box and opened the lid. Inside was a white porcelain teacup decorated with tiny blue forget-me-nots. "It's not cracked," I told her. "You can drink your cocoa from it anytime you want. You don't need permission." She reached for it slowly, cradling it like it might dissolve in her fingers. "It's pretty," she said. "Can it stay with me?" "Of course," I said. "It's yours now." That night, back at my apartment, I took my old cracked teacup. the one with the chip near the rim and the faint hairline fracture running down its side, and placed it on the shelf beside the one I'd given Lily. I'd bought 2. Always planned to. Then I lit a candle. Just one. And opened the new journal I'd picked up from a bookstore tucked behind the courthouse. I'd asked the clerk to emboss the title myself. The gold letters glinted softly under the flickering flame. Things I was told never to say. I pressed my pen to the first page. They never hit me hard enough to kill me, just hard enough to make me quiet. The ink flowed. But now, silence isn't my legacy. I paused, took a breath. This is protecting a child like I once needed, and that is enough. I closed the journal gently, the pages still warm. Then I sat back and stared at the 2 cups. One cracked, one whole, and both, finally, safe. Sometimes the deepest scars are the ones no one believes. Have you ever been gaslit or silenced by the people meant to protect you? Tell me your story. I read every word, and I believe you.